Hello and welcome back to the Drop Step podcast. This may be part 2 if you're listening here. We've had Charlie Cummings sort of organically talk about his excitement for the New York half of this titanic trade that went down at the weekend, but I had to go and get old friend and new, established Minnesota Timberwolves and Lynx media member, Andrew Dukowitz. Andrew, I'm so excited to have you on. We've just spent a good 10-15 minutes talking about Media Day. You're hitting the big time and you're on the Drop Step podcast. So that kind of means that I've made it big too.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to be at Vegas next year. So we'll rub elbows with all the famous people, but I appreciate it. For your listeners, I'm officially on the Wolves beat now. I have full credentials for locker room, media, practice, everything. So hit me up on Twitter if you're a Wolves fan or a Lynx fan, @DukeMN. But other than that, happy to be here. Happy to be back here, Jack, as always.
Are you happy to be discussing a trade of any kind? Because I think the storyline that I've sort of seen propagated is this was the best team of the last 20 years, sort of at least, if not the best team in Minnesota franchise history, pre move over to LA, I suppose. Why would you mess with this? Is this just a financial decision? Obviously, Cat signed a very large extension where he was due, I think, an average of $55 million a year over the next couple of years, few years even. So, Andrew, when you looked at this trade initially, were you annoyed? Were you excited? Were you a mix of both, or an emotion that I haven't even brought up yet?
I'm going to preface this by saying I am not a Cat guy. I've had season tickets for the Wolves for the past 8 years. I've watched them in person probably 300 something times. And unfortunately, I never got to meet him as a member of the media because he got traded 2 days before I'd be able to meet him. So this is speaking as someone who's watched his game. I will say that Karl Anthony Towns is one of the most genuinely nice, caring human beings by literally all accounts, from coaching staff, beat writers, random people walking down to go to Walmart or the gas station. Everyone in Minnesota has the same feeling of, he's a frustrating player, but he is such a good person. So my initial reaction was just shoot, he's gone. I mean, Naz Reid is the most tenured Timberwolf now. That's insane. After that kind of shock left of holy crap, they did it. I think it went to me as just kind of gratefulness because this team was really going to be stuck. I mean, with Rudy having a player option going into next season, with Nas locked up, with Anthony Edwards getting a super max that is probably going to be more expensive if he continues to make all NBA teams and all-star teams. Jaden is going to be making $26 million a year. And then you put Cat as a third super max on this team. They were stuck. There was nowhere they could go this year or next year. If they went into next year at the second level of that, tax bracket, they would have lost picks. They would have lost mid-level exemptions. This team would be quite literally stuck for the next 2 or 3 years. With the Cat trade and picking up Julius Randle, who, his player option for next year, I think it behooves him to decline it just because he's worth more than the 19 million I think he's going to get paid, or 29 million, either 19 or 29.
29. I think it's 29 million. When a guy is Julius Randle's age, it's I want to hit the market and I want to get long-term money guaranteed, as opposed to doing the whole year by year thing. I think that's only kind of reserved for LeBron now. Everyone else just seems to go, no, I'll sign for as long as I can, for as much as I can.
And if he declines the option and gets a 4-year, $200 million contract from, I don't know, Charlotte, great. But the point of it is now you have a long-term asset in DiVincenzo who makes approximately $34 million less than Karl Anthony Towns. Yeah. And Julius Randle is, for this season, a good replacement player for Cat. He's not going to equal Cat. Cat is, he says it, he's the best shooting big man of all time, but statistically, he is the best shooting big man of all time. You can't replace that with Julius Randle. You can't replace it with DiVincenzo. but the ability to have that flexibility money-wise to where not next season, but the season after, they can have a max contract slot open for Giannis, for Luka, for the next angry superstar that goes, boy, it might be fun to play with Ant and Jaden.
Yeah.
That was kind of my second analysis was like, man, this sucks. They actually traded like a really good person that like the community loves, followed by, oh man, they can make moves now. This isn't going to be the team for the next 3 years.
Yeah, and I think some of the other stuff to come out was sort of, if they hadn't made this move, as you've alluded to, I think it was maybe Shams that said, or maybe it was John Krasinski rather, that said, they'd have had to have traded Nikhil, they'd have had to have let Naz go as well. So it's just, if you view that trade as you get Randle, you get Donte, and you get the optionality of keeping those two as well, that definitely means something. I initially looked and I thought, I really don't know if that pick needs to be in there. When you look for sort of like player for player value, I'm a big Donte DiVincenzo fan. A lot has been sort of made and published and said in the last 48 hours about this from the Knicks side. So I've got a load of stats seared into my brain. I know for the last 35 games of the season, Donte was a 21 point per game scorer, and he was putting up 12 threes per game. And when you're talking about a guy who's also a decent connective passer and a really determined and actually capable perimeter defender as well, that's I don't know if I'd go as far as saying like sub all-star if you're going to borrow thinking basketball verbiage, but that is a guaranteed starter at that position, locked up on a really positive contract for the team. And then Julius as well. Julius is the most disrespected two-time All-NBA player currently playing in the association. I don't know how far back you'd have to go. It's just well, I say that it's kind of Julius, and I think it's Rudy as well.
Yeah.
This a lot of the time when football managers are coaching over here, you hear a lot about siege mentality and sort of getting this us against them and building this screw the rest of them, we're going to prove them all wrong. I mean, between Shaquille O'Neal's comments and the amount of clowning that Julius Randle has got over the last couple of years, I don't care how much love Ant gets in the media. You can certainly build that narrative if you're Chris Finch. So I think that this team could come out angry. And then having that pick as well just gives them back a little bit of the optionality that they perhaps willingly sacrifice come draft time to get Rob Dillingham through the door. I think that they've moved that 2031 pick. I think it was a 2030 swap as well. Yeah. A lot of the chat has been this 2025 Detroit pick, while it's probably not going to convey in 25, might not convey in 26. We think through its lifespan, it's going to be a sort of like just outside the lottery pick, which is, that's valuable in today's NBA. So I think from an on-court perspective, the question that a lot of people are going to have is Ant is one of the most devastating drivers to the rim currently in the association. I was so impressed last year seeing the development of his handle. I was listening to a draft podcast the other day, and I think it was Raphael and James Barlow. They said when Ant is sort of like slicing through the lane, it looks like he doesn't have a bone in his body. And I love that. I'm going to borrow that. It's a great way to put it. He looks like a slinky to me. But it was already a fairly crowded paint before with Rudy there. Now you're getting rid of Cat. You're getting rid of a 40% three-point shooter for essentially the entirety of his career. How do you feel this trade is going to affect Ant, and how do you feel it's going to affect his interior scoring? Do you think we're kind of shutting off the rim a little bit for Ant and relying on him to be a really tough shot maker?
I think Naz Reid will fix a lot of these problems. I think, Chris Finch said on Media Day, which he couldn't talk about the trade, but he did talk about how he wants Rudy and Mike in particular to get nights off, to get less minutes, to be able to conserve themselves for the playoffs. So Randle kind of helps in that sense, where Rudy might not have to play, 76 games this year. He might be closer to 64. I also think Randle did a pretty good job with Brunson of being able to sit on the wings and kind of space. And He's only, I think for my article, I looked it up. 5 out of the last 6 years, he shot 30% or better from three, including 140% season.
Yeah.
Is he going to shoot 40%? No. But the attention Ant commands is similar to Brunson, where if Ant drives in, kicks it out to Randle, Randle's really just kind of a fullback that can just bowl his way to the rim. And he doesn't have the hops he used to, but he's still pretty good at just that catch and drive. And then Naz Reid, how much is Randle and Gobert going to play together? 15, 18 minutes a night, maybe. There's also a lot of chatter of just on the Timberwolves side of it is Naz Reid might end up taking closing minutes from Randle. I mean, he took closing minutes from Towns last year. The Wolves don't really have any loyalty to Randle. It could be that this is more of a bet on Naz Reid being able to fit in that starting lineup. That being said, if it is Randle, it'll look clunky at first. Randle has the ability to throw lobs to bigs. He did it pretty well with Mitchell Robinson. He has a pretty good drive in, and I don't know, Karl Anthony Towns, they used to call it stray voltage, where he tries to do passes that he's not capable of making and throws it into the third row.
Sure.
Randle's averaged 6 assists a game before. I think over the last 4 years, he's averaged around 5 every year. I mean, that's a valuable playmaker. I think his reputation of being a ball stopper is warranted, because he does need to set himself up in the paint. But I think if they are able to move him out to the wing more, or just have him not play with Rudy as much and more with Naz, it'll open a lot of that up. That being said, he doesn't care how many people are in the paint. Let's just be honest. If he decides he's going to dunk on someone, he's going to do it. He has an insane mid-range game. He's told us that he's been working his tail off all off season to get better at shooting those pull-up threes as well. So it's going to be Ant, I think, will figure it out no matter what.
John Collins was in the paint that fateful night back in, I can't remember if it was Utah or Minnesota last year, but that didn't seem to matter a damn thing. So you're absolutely right. If Ant intends to dunk it, he's going to go up and damn well dunk it. I just want to hit on that Julius Randle ball stopper thing, because I think it's an astute point that you make, Andrew. And when you speak about his ability to catch and drive, one of the things that I noticed today, I went back and I watched all of Julius's assists and his assisted 2-point field goals. And whenever it's assisted, one of the great things about him is that he doesn't wait for the ball to arrive to start moving. So it's a stampede cut. It's an avalanche cut, if that's what you want to call it. He's catching on the move. So a lot of your worry might be when you hear about the reputation of Julius is, oh, great, we've collapsed the defense, swing. It gets to Randle and it's dribble hezzy, 3 dribbles, and he sort of sucks the life out of the game. I might worry about that if he's bringing the ball up, or if he's catching with sort of 18, 16 seconds left on the shot clock. But he's a more than capable closeout attacker. And I think that his tendencies are far more let me get my post touches, but he knows when he has an advantage that he has to go and sort of take advantage of it. I think that you referenced there as well, he's got a lot of experience playing with non-spacing bigs. I've said a couple of times on this podcast in the last couple of months, Mitchell Robinson's average shot distance is 1.5 feet every year. Yeah. It's dunk or nothing. And I think that Rudy is a slightly more capable short roll player than Mitchell Robinson, probably not as capable as Isaiah Hartenstein was, but this is nothing new to Julius Randle. I think that he's going to be able to propel bench units. I think that Rob Dillingham might really benefit from playing with a guy that has really got the most out of a 6-foot sort of shifty guard that probably has no physical right to be scoring a ton in the NBA. So that could be something that's really interesting. A lot of the worry is
their reserve unit is going to be, on paper right now, it's Dillingham, Nikhil, DiVincenzo, either Randle or Gobert, and then Naz. That's how they want to run it. And if it isn't Randle or Gobert, it'll be Jaden. So if it's Jaden, Naz, Dillingham, DiVincenzo, and Nikhil, that is going to be just all effort, balls to the wall, just running as fast as they can. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. Which is just such a contrast to their bench unit last year, where it was Kyle Anderson, Nikhil.
Yes.
I mean, it was slow, plodding, methodical kind of bench possessions. And this year they have 4 capable scorers and, Jaden, Rudy, or Randle out there.
I mean, Terrence Shannon Jr. as well is a guy that is not averse to getting out in transition if he's able to crack the rotation early on in his Minnesota career.
That's the other thing
we've
that's
spoken before about that. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say that's the other thing about this rotation that's so interesting now is I just listed 9 players, including the starters. They still have Joe Ingles. They still have Terrence Shannon. Keita Bates-Diop is coming in the trade, who has proven to be a serviceable backup spot starter. Jalen Clark's coming back from his Achilles injury. Leonard Miller is looking to do anything. Josh Minot's looking to do anything. And Luka is on a guaranteed contract. I mean, there are going to be 5 players absolutely battling for not even rotation minutes, but that 10th spot to get rotation minutes if someone's hurt. I mean, this team is going to be so deep that it's again, the Cat trade is hard to swallow as a Minnesota fan person, just because he's been here and he's such a good dude. But the depth that DiVincenzo brings, I mean, Rob can almost have the liberty of being a train wreck off the beginning of the year, and it might not matter.
And Ant played 79 games last year in the regular season, made a really, really deep postseason run, and then went and played in the Olympics too. So if he's not quite the Iron Man that he was last year, I think that you're probably in a better space with Julius Randle as your like faux or fill-in number 1 on nights than you would have been with Towns, because I think that one of the things I spoke about with Charlie was with Towns, I think you can probably get there where if you want to build the system around him and you want a space and you want to have like guys cutting and slashing, then that could definitely work. But you're not going to sort of draw up that scheme on a Tuesday night to go and play on the Wednesday night if you hear that Ant is going to miss the game. So Julius is a really nice plug and play, I would say, like innings eater. If we want to go Minnesota Twins here, that's I think that's a fairly decent way to look at him. And the other thing that I really like is that we've spoken about maybe the lack of 3-point spacing that Randle provides. We know that Rudy is not, despite that like 1-3 in FIBA last year. I doubt he's going to be spacing from the corners anytime soon. But
probably not.
Naz Reid. I never know how to say it with my English accent. And Donte DiVincenzo are 2 of the more aggressive 3-point shooters for their position, and they happen to shoot above 40% from 3. So from a pure maths perspective, they have the sort of willing 3-point shot takers to make these units work, even if you're not getting spacing from every position on the floor.
Nikhil shot over 40% from 3. Mike Conley shot over 40% from 3. I mean, they are expecting Jaden to take a big leap this year. That's been kind of the whole media day was just about Jaden's going to be taking more of a playmaking role. He's going to take some of Cat's responsibilities, scoring. I mean, if Jaden can shoot 40% from 3, then you have a rotation that has Donte, Nikhil, Joe Ingles. I mean, we'll give him his credit. He shot over 40%. Mike, Naz, and Jaden. I mean, that's 6 40% 3-point shooters around 2 post guys and Ants. That's not a bad way to build a roster.
Despite the fact that Reed Shepherd shot 50% from 3 in Kentucky last year, there were draft guys that I really respected saying, no, I think that Rob is the best shooter in the draft, because you look at the sort of diversity of 3-pointers that he made, the access to the mid-range game as well. So even the young core sort of has it going from 3-point range. When I initially messaged you about this trade, I jumped straight to the lineup that I think the Minnesota Timberwolves might be envisioning in 2025-26, where I described this ultra mobile, really aggressive defensive and really vibrant offensive lineup, where you have a starting backcourt of Donte DiVincenzo and Anthony Edwards. You then have Jaden McDaniels and Naz Reid, and then you've got Rudy Gobert anchoring everything. And you sort of pumped the brakes a little bit, and you said, from what I've heard, Mike Conley is still going to have a ton of responsibility for this team this year.
Yeah.
What do you envision Ant's role being? Because I might have got it a little bit earlier. I think that his efficiency is going to be suppressed by this move a little bit, because I think that he is going to see his lanes to the rim cut off a little bit, and he's probably going to receive slightly closer, like perimeter spacing attention from the defense, because it's not Cat that a team has to respect. It's Julius Randle. So they might be closing out on his 3-pointers even harder than previously. So what do you think of like the importance to Mike Conley this year, and what do you think Ant's role is going to look like with this new kind of lineup?
So Chris Finch was asked about their clutch stats last year, which I don't have them up in front of me, but they were not great. They were regular season, not a very good clutch team. And he started his answer by saying, you know, there's a lot of things we can do better. We want to get, you know, more ball movement, less stickiness. Then he kind of paused and he just said, well, actually, we just get away from what we do best. And what we do best is Mike Conley. That's it. Chris Finch loves the guy. He is Chris Finch's brain on the court. I think they still want him to play 25 to 28 minutes a night. And in those clutch situations, he is going to run the show. I think 2 years from now, it could be Ants. It could be, I'm going to be honest. I watched a lot of Rob Dillingham, and like, I think he could be, for any like new followers of me that listen to this, like, man, I'm not trying to like crap on the Allen Iverson comparison. Like, if that's what he ends up being, I'll eat crow. But like, he might just be like a 20-minute, really good microwave scorer off the bench for his whole career. Like, that being said, having Mike Conley that can run that pick and roll, kick it over to Ant for a drive or a three, be able to set up Rudy for a lob, be able to set up Jaden for a corner three, like, that is his importance. And I think it'll be really eye-opening to see if that changes throughout the season. Because if Anthony Edwards is really taking the leap that like he expects to take, I mean, he expects to be the best player in the league this year, like win the MVP in a championship. Like, if he takes that leap, we're going to start seeing him control the ball in the fourth quarter. And then, I mean, Mike Conley was one of the best spot up shooting guards in the league last year. So it might just be Conley sitting above the break, Randle in the corner, McDaniels in the corner, Rudy underneath, and then Ant going from there. But I think they are very much in the, we need Mike Conley to be the adult and settle everyone down.
Especially on a sort of like regular season basis. I was really impressed with Ant through the postseason last year, when sort of round by round, I think that people started to say like, oh my God, he might be the best player in the league against the Suns. And then he was absolutely electric in the first few games against the Nuggets, and then started seeing really aggressive coverage. And then against the Mavericks, I think the perception was like, maybe he's getting a little bit tired here. This is his first deep postseason run, but I believe he averaged about 8 assists per game against the Mavericks, and still got up around 24, 25 points per game as well. I think the willingness to move the ball, the lack of like, no, I have to split this double team, I have to be Kobe, I have to make the hero ball shot, is really, really encouraging. And to me, I look at Minnesota and I think that the advantage that Ant gives you over 90% of teams in the NBA is that he is a two-way star.
Yeah.
And to me, if I'm in Tim Connelly's shoes, and I am not the GM that Tim Connelly is, obviously, I'm going, if our number one guy can be a two-way player, I don't want to sort of dampen that weakness anywhere else on the roster. I want all two-way guys. And I know that in his heyday, Mike Conley was a proper two-way star as well. But the poor guy's ancient these days. I think he's maybe 37, 38 this year. So while he's absolutely sort of like, the brain is as quick as anything, physically he's either not got the weight or not quite got the fleetness of foot to keep up with everyone on a night-to-night basis. I look and I think, if Ant can be that primary ball handler and then you can have an absolute bulldog Villanova mentality guy next to him in the backcourt long term, like Donte DiVincenzo. You're just going to be so tough to play against on a night-to-night basis. And, we're not even mentioning Rudy Gobert yet, who is still, for a lot of people's money, the best rim protector in the league, not the other Frenchman.
I mean, it might be the other Frenchman this year, but Rudy is expecting a 5th defensive player of the year. That's his expectation this year, is that this team is going to be just as good defensively. Yeah, I think ideally this season is the season that we start to see Ant running a lot of those end of quarter sets, running a lot of the end of the game stuff. I think that's the ideal progression that Chris Finch would like to do, is, hopefully, they get 10 games into the year and Ant's making good decisions. Unfortunately, Ant's, when he sees certain looks on double teams, when he sees certain, he almost, I'm not going to say he almost like processes too fast for his body to react, meaning like he'll see like the sagging defender in the corner, and before that defender is fully sagged in, he throws the pass and it's intercepted. Or he'll see things that he's seen on tape, or that like Mike, for example, has told him to look for, and he'll almost get like so excited that he sees it that he makes the decision before he should, which then causes a turnover. And that's just being 22 years old. I mean, 27-year-old Anthony Edwards is going to be massively improved from what we see now. I think this year is just going to be kind of like Bill Simmons always kind of talks about like the steps of like somebody being great. And like, this might be another step, another like rung up the ladder of like, okay, now he's making those playmaking decisions almost every time. And then I do think DiVincenzo would fit better next to Ant, next to Jaden, just like defensively, because Mike is, I mean, the poor guy got like an ankle injury last year, and like he's like completely vegan already. He does like yoga already. Like he's already doing all the things. So like, if you can limit his minutes at all, like please do.
Yeah.
But this team just loves that guy so much that it just knowing Chris Finch the little bit that I do, and like from watching him for years, I think it's like the Kyle Anderson thing. Even when Kyle's having a bad game and he's a bad matchup, he was going to get minutes. I think Mike's probably in that boat where it's just Mike has to be out there to calm everyone.
And I think that a player that isn't quite at the level that either player were during their heyday, but that has drawn comparisons to Mike Conley through their career, is Kyle Lowry. And Kyle Lowry has seen a steeper physical decline in the last couple of years than Mike Conley has. But you notice that Eric Spoelstra still liked to put him out there 25, 30 minutes a night. He was still productive when he got to Philly last year. He still re-signed on another deal, and I'm sure that for second units, he's going to be really important. There comes a stage where if the brain is that quick, it doesn't really matter how much the body slows down. So I think that you're making a great point there, Andrew, where it's just, we'll ride that guy till the cows come home. And he deserves a championship.
I just feel for him.
Yeah.
Like, I just feel for him. My knees hurt after like going up a few flights of stairs. Like, I can't even imagine how he's walking after games. Like, maybe he's not. Maybe they just put him in his sled and drag him. But
I reckon
for
he's
him and Rudy,
and he's grinding his knees. He's grinding his joints. Probably. Get that Memphis
for him
motto,
and Rudy, though. I mean, both of those guys deserve a ring. I mean, they've been around so long.
I wanted to come on to Rudy. I've got two more questions before we finish this up. And my other question was going to be, are you glad it was Cat that went instead of Rudy? Do you think that Rudy is more integral to the identity of this team? Or do you think that you'd have rather kept Cat and maybe seen a more spaced out floor that Ant could operate in?
One, I think... So let's just assume like we traded Rudy and we got the same pieces back, which I think everyone can agree that would have never happened, right? Like Rudy's value at this point with $48 million, he gets played off the floor, or at least that's the kind of reputation he's gotten. Watching him a lot, like he's for a 7'3" dude. Really good at on-ball defense on guards. But I think Cat almost had to go just from the salary structure of he was going to get paid for the next 4 years. I mean, that locks this team down. And Rudy, if he falls off a cliff this year, he's a player option and you can salary flip him. I mean, it's easier to get off the money. I think for like the culture of this team, I do think I'm glad it was Cat and not Rudy. Rudy is the defensive play caller. He holds everyone on that defense accountable.
Yep.
He does it in a way where Kyle Anderson might want to punch him, but at the same time, like, he holds people accountable. Whereas Karl Anthony Towns is a phenomenal human being, but he really didn't hold people accountable to the way that Rudy does on defense. And I think it's always, and I've heard no reporting on it from anywhere, from on Twitter, anything. I think it is just inherently hard when you are the leader of a team for 6 years and then all of a sudden someone else comes in and takes that from you. I don't know how that would have progressed this season, but I do think there's some inherently just, like, it's not a bad thing that he got traded and we'll never have to find out.
Yeah, I get that. It's kind of a nice way to sort of like sign off legacy wise. You've got to have that really great season in the place that you were drafted. You left them in a far better place than you found them. And you get to go on and you get to have that next chapter. For what it's worth, I completely agree. I think that Rudy is far more pivotal to this team. While he is sort of getting up there in age, it's not a skill that we've really seen drop off too much. I think that once the legs go, the legs really, really go for these size guys. But until that happens, Rudy is going to continue to be a all NBA level impact player, even if it doesn't look it stylistically on a night to night basis. And I would rather say to Ant, can you work around some of the limitations? Can you force yourself to figure out that chemistry with a rolling big man instead of having that 5-out option? And we'll guarantee you a top 5, top 10 defense on the other end, right? It's just, you don't have to lock in and be Michael Jordan on that end yet. Preferably you can be Michael Jordan on the offensive end first. But finally, I wonder if Randle sort of like comes to an agreement and finds a way to re-sign with Minnesota long term, just because I look around and I think that fit-wise, there aren't a ton of teams in the league that are crying out for a Julius Randle. Like, yeah, if you can get him, great. But at the same time, there's an opportunity cost to signing these guys. And I think that Minnesota is quite a neat little home for him. But say that Tim Connolly doesn't feel that way and the intention is to maybe flip him to another team in the deadline. At the deadline, rather. Is there a profile of player that you'd like to see added to this team that's perhaps on a slightly more reasonable contract, long term, and then you feel like you've got your locked in core for the next couple of years?
I think with Randle, it's going to be similar to with Cat, where what are you going to get that equals Randle's production? Because you brought up a really good point. Like, he is an innings eater. It's like the theory behind Russell Westbrook going to the Lakers. Like, he's going to bring it on the nights LeBron can't play.
Yeah.
I think it's a possibility that Randle will get traded. I don't think it'll be for a long-term piece, though. I think that the flexibility to be able to bring in their own guys means a ton to them. And I think if they're going to go with Randle, if this team, let's say at the deadline, it's not good, it's like 22-28 or whatever, and they need to make a move, I think it's far more likely that like a Nikhil gets traded for like a $10-11 million guy and they just let Randle walk, then Randle gets traded. Now, that being said, if like Giannis is unhappy in Milwaukee, I mean, they can put the salaries together and keep most of their pieces, and Randle's something you can sell to fans. But I think it's a lot more likely. I think even in re-signing him, I think again, like if they're awesome, they're 30-12 or something at the midway point, and he wants to talk extension, I think they are still almost more likely to just say, you know what, you can pick up your player option if you want, but like we don't really see a long-term place for you. Again, I think they are really high on Naz Reid. I think they think Naz Reid is going to take a massive leap this year. And I think they think they're going to have to pay Naz Reid $30 million in the near future.
That's fair.
If they were to trade Randle, I think it would just be for like a guy on a 1-year deal that could help him in the playoffs. And that's it. Now,
let's flip this round. We've got over the internet issues. I can edit that out. Don't worry, dude. I'm going to throw you a couple of players that I looked at that I thought made sense for a variety of reasons. And these would all be 3-team deals because I don't know if Randle is a 1-to-1 fit in these places. But looking down sort of the salary line, the two players that I was drawn to were Cam Johnson and Kyle Kuzma, who are both sort of flexible 3-4s that bring a little bit on both ends. Cam Johnson, a much more capable shooter than Kyle Kuzma, but both of them are locked down to descending contracts long term as well. So if you're looking to sort of thread the needle, control your salary structure, and not give up an all NBA guy for nothing come free agency, I think that they're two nice pieces that would make sense long term for this rotation.
I think Kyle Kuzma, I don't know if they would be interested in, because Kyle Kuzma is kind of similar to Randle, where he needs his touches and he wants kind of that role offensively. I think, again, if how they are expecting this to play out is Jaden McDaniels takes a big leap, Naz Reid takes a big leap, Nickeil develops, and they have Rob as kind of Rob and Shannon as kind of their real young guys. I think Cam Johnson would probably fit on this team, but I think he would probably be relegated to the bench just because if they get rid of Randle, Naz Reid is starting. So I could see the fit with Cam Johnson pretty well. I do think if they were to move on from Randolph, they would probably look for more of like a backup center at that point then than another wing. Because if Naz is starting next to Rudy, they need someone to get minutes, which, I mean, ironically, Mitchell Robinson kind of fits the bill for what they would look for in a backup center. So maybe there's a Gobert or a Randle New York reunion in the future. But
if they re-sign Rudy long term, then it probably makes sense to get more of like a chalk and cheese style option where it's we've got the big 7-foot rim protector here, and then maybe we have a slightly more mobile switchy big, or we have a 3-point spacer. I know that Naz can fill that role. I've got Spot Track open, and the one position that jumps out to me is let's say that Rob Dillingham looks like he's a multi-year project in his first year in the NBA. Could go after a long-term point guard, and you could go after, let's say Lonzo Ball has a resurgent year in Chicago. That's a salary that works. Marcus Smart is a guy that's potentially not too happy in Memphis at the moment, or might find his role getting squeezed. He absolutely fits in with the ethos of this team. Colin Sexton is a player that I think resembles what the franchise probably hopes Rob Dillingham can be. Probably want like Rob to be more creative long term, but Colin had a phenomenal year last year in Utah. They're the other three names, at least at the guard positions, that I look at and I say you've got optionality with that Randle contract, and they're players that fit in salary wise.
Completely agree. I think if Rob struggles off the bat, I think they have a lot of hope that Nickeil's going to be a backup point guard this year. If that doesn't work out, they will be in the market for a true point guard, and it does make a lot of sense to trade Randle. I would love Lonzo Ball on this team. I don't know if he would love coming off the bench for like 20 minutes a night. And that's kind of
Sure.
my fear with like a Marcus Smart too, is if he's already unhappy in Memphis being a backup point guard, what's going to be different here? It's just a really weird team they have where they have this benefit of depth and benefit of like, these are the guys we think are going to take a step. But then they have the contracts where they could get Alonzo Ball. But then it's, again, Chris Finch isn't going to start Alonzo over Mike Conley. It's just, that's how Finch is wired.
I would disagree with that slightly if Lonzo comes back at the level we saw prior to his injury, because all the stuff that we've spoken about with Donte DiVincenzo, Lonzo Ball brings, while also being a better passer, being 3 inches taller as well. So that would be the perfect long-term fit next to Ant as a guy that can get you going in transition, set the rhythm in the half court, but then make sure he's your primary scorer. So in an ideal world, Lonzo Ball returns to full health. Chicago embraces a youth movement, and suddenly he has this like flourishing career next to one of the best players in the league. That would be a really, really nice outcome. Malcolm Brogdon is the only like single year guy that makes sense for the first point you made, Andrew, where it's like we could bring this guy in and then agree to, a 3-year, $39 million extension, that kind of thing, where the money is really low.
Lonzo, if he is peak Lonzo, fits so well with Anthony Edwards. I mean, both of them are incredibly switchable on defense. Lonzo can shoot threes. He's an incredibly gifted passer. Like those two, if it's peak Lonzo, would be, I agree. I think if Lonzo comes back and he is peak Lonzo, his knees have been rejuvenated with cartilage, then 100%. But I mean, the other ones, Marcus Smart, I mean,
slightly less.
That's tough. And then Colin Sexton, he'd be good, but I almost, if they're trading for a Colin Sexton, I think Robert Dillingham has gone completely off the rails with him, because that would almost have to be like oh no, Rob is not ready.
I think that's a really, really good way to put it. It occurred to me that Lonzo was able to make Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan sort of work together. And Anthony Edwards is a pretty perfect amalgamation of those guys' offensive skills. It's like if you put those two in, the body sort of like combining chamber, Anthony Edwards would emerge with all the athleticism, the 3-point shooting, and then like the mid-range game of DeMar. So that would be super, super fun. I think we're going to close with like a 90-second. Do you feel more confident in this team winning a championship now than you did a week ago?
Oddly, no. I do think that Karl Anthony Towns is that much better than Julius Randle. I think the camaraderie they had, the consistency they had, I think they were better with Towns. I think they had a better chance of winning it this year with Towns. I think they've opened the window a lot longer, though. I think with Towns, that championship or bust window is probably 2 years. I think with how they're set up now, it's probably closer to 4 or 5, because they can get off of a lot of contracts, free up space. They can unload players to get picks back. They are no longer in that second apron where they're losing picks, losing signing privileges. Again, I think it's a really smart deal. And if things work out the way the team thinks it's going to work out, they'll probably be better. Just objectively looking at it, though, I do think they probably got a little worse to get that flexibility.
I think they've opened the door to Anthony Edwards being a one franchise guy when his career is over. I think that if you kept Cat and you had gone title or bust, either way, Minnesota would have got to a position like you've alluded to, Andrew, where they find themselves without a lot of moves, without a lot of assets, and is hitting his sort of mid to late 20s, free agency, and it's I can go and play for one of the most star-studded franchises. Everyone's going to want me. Everyone's going to offer me a supermax, and it's that Kevin Garnett situation where I've given it my best. I've given loyal years of service, but it's time for me to move to one of the classic like NBA teams. But no, this is your chance to have a Dirk Nowitzki, a Steph Curry, a God, these guys don't pop up very often. A Tim Duncan, essentially. Now
Mhm.
you keep the flexibility open, you keep the window, and hopefully it's that Daryl Morey thing of, do you want better odds on fewer rolls of the dice, or do you want more rolls of the dice? And that's going to be the question for Minnesota going forward. But I feel really good about their regular season chances this year. I still think that they can defend Denver in the same way, which has been a concern for people. You know, one of the
Yep.
things that I texted you was that the Lakers have tried the same thing as Minnesota, and they've just used Rui Hachimura instead of Karl Anthony Towns and Jokic. Julius Randle is a big-bodied, powerful, 250-pound guy. He's not going to willow away under the pressure of like a Jokic post-up. Jokic will still get his own, but will get his own against anyone. So I don't think that that's gone. And like you said, there's just more flexibility and potential responsibility for the likes of Naz Reid, for the likes of Jaden McDaniels, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and now Donte DiVincenzo as well. I think that this is going to be a violent team. I think it's going to be one that no one wants to play against during the regular season or the postseason. So I really look forward to watching them this year. And I really look forward to reading, listening, and watching your coverage, Mr. Big Time, Andrew, over there, fully on the beat for both the Timberwolves and the Lynx. Andrew, you are my first official beat reporter on the podcast.
Hey.
I've got a Pokédex going. I've got to collect one for every franchise. But I really appreciate it, man. Thank you for your time today. And yeah, I hope you guys really enjoyed that conversation.
Appreciate it, Jack. And anytime you want me on, seriously. People that gave me the time of day when I didn't have anything going and was just starting writing a year ago, I always have time for you guys.
I'm going to hold you to it. I'm going to hold you to it when you're at the NBA Finals in a couple of years. I'm like, where are my free tickets? Where? No, not quite that, but podcast appearances are plenty. Yeah, guys, I really hope you enjoyed that mini episode, I suppose we'll call it, unless we combine it into a double with the Charlie Cummings Knicks segment. But what a fascinating trade and what a fascinating season we're getting ready for. 24-25. Keep an eye on the Minnesota Timberwolves and keep an eye on Andrew and his coverage. Thank you for listening. Tune in again next time.